Today on Across the Fence, we're talking about trees, forestry management, and how to foster wildlife habitats and outdoor recreation in Vermont's forests. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jolie Whitney. Vermont's country forests provide a valuable service for private landowners and communities. These stewards of the land have the know-how to map out mountain bike trails in town forests, manage woodlands, and promote wildlife, and provide guidance and services to landowners looking to enroll in Vermont's current use program. My guest today is Ethan Tapper. He's a county forester for Chittenden County. In 2022, Ethan was named the Regional Forester of the Year, and with over 1,300 subscribers to his YouTube channel, dare we say he's a local social media celebrity. Thank you for coming and talking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So you're fond of saying that forests are like a huge deal, and if you live in like maybe a suburb, only a third of an acre, or in my case, if you rent an apartment, why should you care?
You know, in Vermont, forests are really important to us for a whole bunch of different reasons, right? So we are about 75% forested as a state, and those forests are providing benefits to all of us in terms of providing scenic beauty, you know, making this a beautiful place to live, economic benefits to our local communities, providing this amazing working landscape, forest-based recreation, of course, the means to live here in terms of clean air, clean water, sequestering and storing carbon, and doing stuff like providing habitat for wildlife. All of these services are provided by the forests that are just around us and are doing all these things for free.
And you working in Chittenden County, what kind of projects have you been working on?
In Chittenden County, you know, I say that all the counties are really different. And so the job of each county forester is really different. And in Chittenden County, you know, we have really interesting forests ecologically, and we have all these amazing town forests that I work with. So we have the Heinsberg Town Forest, which is over 1,100 acres that I've done a lot of forest management, demonstration forest management on. And I've also done a lot of education and outreach. So trying to recognize that, you know, we may just be one of 14 counties, but about a quarter of the people in the state live here. So we have this opportunity to really showcase what responsible forest management is, what healthy forests are, how we care for the forests that we have.
And when you talk about outreach, are you talking about outreaching to like maybe somebody like me who doesn't own forestry, or are you talking about like landowners exclusively?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do a lot of outreach to the county foresters. A big part of our job is providing service to private landowners. So if you own forest land, you can call us up. A lot of people who own larger pieces of forest land are enrolled in what's called our use value appraisal program. Most people call it the current use program, and we provide assistance to those landowners as well. But then also, I think that we have a responsibility to help the general public understand the value of our forests and also the importance of really caring for them. It's something that I think is often underappreciated, is just this fundamental value that ecosystems have to all of us. And I'm really like showcasing that sort of to a more general public audience using stuff like YouTube.
All right, and let's dive a little bit more into the current use you were talking about. How do foresters assist like local landowners with current use laws?
So the current use program has been around since the late 70s. It's a really important conservation program to Vermont, and it's one of the big reasons why we remain such a forested state. So basically, if you have more than 25 acres of forested land, you may be eligible to enroll in the current use program. And again, its official name is the Use Value Appraisal Program. It's called current use by most people. When you enroll in that program, you agree to follow a forest management plan that's developed by a licensed consulting forester, and that's approved and monitored by the county forester. And so we think that this, and I should say in exchange, you get a tax benefit. And so it decreases your taxes that you have to pay. And we think that this benefits Vermonters in a whole bunch of different ways. One is by decreasing the tax burden, so people aren't being taxed off their land. It's more affordable to own forested land. And then also we think it's holding them to a higher standard because they have to follow this forest management plan, which is developed by a professional and again reviewed by the county foresters, who are state employees. And so it really is a program that contributes positively to our working landscape. County foresters, you know, we interact with landowners in terms of like reviewing their plans, but we also are just like, you know, they can phone us up and say, hey, what does this mean in our forest management plan? Or how could I be taking care of my forest better? And we really enjoy doing that as well.
And you don't work as a forest or as a tree service, but can you dive a little more into why someone should give their county forester a call?
Yeah, so one of the reasons we get called a lot that we actually can't help with is like hazard trees, a tree, assessing the health of a tree in your yard, taking down a tree in your yard. That's really the job of an arborist or a tree service. But you can call us up just if you have forested land and you're interested in, you know, seeing what's going on in it, maybe getting some advice on how to manage it better, what opportunities there are, what threats there might be to the healthier forest. You can also call us up if you work for an NGO or a municipality and you're looking to get advice about the management of forests that your organization owns or that your municipality owns. We really are, our job is to provide service to Vermonters in our county that helps them protect the health of forests and manage their forests better. And that's what we're here for.
And you've posted about 179 videos to your YouTube channel, which is very impressive to begin with.
Thanks.
And in a moment, we'll be watching one of them. But could you tell us before we do why you started posting?
I really, again, I think that we can't overstate the importance of educating everybody about how important forests are, and what responsible forest management is and what it looks like. I think that there's a lot of misunderstandings about, what it means to cut a tree and what it means to take care of a forest and what a healthy forest even looks like, that are things that we can really unpack. And as a forest management community, we do walks and talks, and sometimes it feels like we could do a better job at just reaching out to everybody. So I was really seeing that people are consuming a lot of information, forming a lot of ideas through social media, through stuff like YouTube. And so it was really important to sort of reach people where they're at. Also really important to reach people in younger demographics that might be consuming more of that information via YouTube, and maybe they're not going to come out to a walk with me in the wintertime on a forest management project, but they are going to watch a video that I make on YouTube.
Yeah, make it more accessible for somebody in their living room, maybe.
Exactly.
All right, and without further ado, here's Ethan talking about the importance of fostering legacy trees in the forest.
Stop scrolling for a second so I can tell you about how much I love big trees and how important they are to forest ecology. So if you come out to one of my forest management projects, you'll notice a couple different things. One thing you'll notice is that it'll look like a mess with unlopped treetops and trees laying on the ground everywhere. And another thing you'll notice is that there'll be a lot of big trees still there that will be marked with an L. That L stands for legacy, and we call them legacy trees or biological legacy trees. So the idea of these legacy trees is that within a managed forest, we also have trees that we're retaining solely for their ecological value. And these are not trees that we're going to cut later. These are trees that will never be cut. When we look at, say, old growth forests, which are this really good template for what forests have looked like here in Vermont for thousands of years, we see that they have a few different attributes. They have deep, well-developed soils. They have lots of deadwood on the ground. They have structural diversity, so many different sizes and ages of trees, and they also have some big trees. One of the misconceptions about old growth forests is that there are these areas with like all old trees, and that's just not true. What we see is more like 10 to 12 old trees per acre. If we're managing forests based solely on economics, there's a period that we call economic maturity. Economic maturity is a point at which a tree has maxed out its potential value relative to the risk of keeping it in the forest. So if you're thinking about your forest as a commodity or as an investment, that's the point at which that investment has matured and you cut that tree. There was another reason why you would cut a big tree, and that's because it was big and not valuable. So those trees were called decadent, and the thought was that they were just taking up space. Taking up growing space that could be used to grow younger, thrifty trees. And so a lot of times these trees that had tremendous wildlife and ecological value, but actually no financial value, would be cut just to get them out of the way. And so we end up in this situation where if a tree is big and valuable, you cut it to capture that value. And if a tree is big and not valuable, you cut it to get it out of the way. And the result is that we never have any big trees in our forests. With many of our tree species, there are these amazing ecological values that they develop, and a lot of those values actually accrue after the tree reaches that point of economic maturity. So with a sugar maple tree like the one behind me, when it reaches 18 inches in diameter or 20 inches of diameter, you might say it's economically mature, but it may still have 200 years to live, during which time it will develop these really interesting and important attributes. Among those are complex bark structure, so deeply furrowed bark, which will have this really amazing habitat for a diversity of different invertebrates. We also see the development of some of these mosses, lichens, and bryophytes, stuff like liverworts that may take centuries to develop.
To watch more of Ethan's videos, search Chittenden County Forester on youtube.com. And of course, you mentioned in that some trees are marked so they don't get cut down, but a lot of your work involves forestry. So what do you say to people who maybe don't want any tree to be cut down ever?
It's actually been this really interesting journey for me personally. I got into forests not because I was interested in cutting trees down, but just because I loved forests. This is what I wanted, the work that I wanted to do was to just care for them. And it became clear when you take a deeper dive into what forests are all about and the way that they work that, number one, our forests are really altered. Most of Vermont's forests are super duper young, and they don't really have any of these important attributes that we might see in like an old growth forest. These things like multi-generationality, different generations of trees, different sizes and ages of trees, big old trees, dead wood on the ground, all of which are these vital habitats for our biodiversity and also critical to things like a forest resilience in light of climate change. And started to see that actually there could be a real beauty and importance of taking action. And one of the tools that we have at our disposal to do that is the cutting of trees, to actually use forest management and even commercial forest management as a tool to get our forests into a better place. And so then it became this really interesting, part of my own personal journey to figure out how we can use the cutting of the trees in the best way possible while protecting all of these ecological values and even, using forest management as like ecological restoration, which is, I consider all the forest management work that I do to be restoration.
And if I'm watching the news and I see a story about like timber harvesting, especially in light of climate change, what kind of questions should I be asking?
I think one of the real misunderstandings about forest management is that people view it as a monolith. So they see or they hear horror stories about these big clear cuts maybe on the West Coast, and they're like, that's what forest management is. And what I say is that the work that I do and that a lot of foresters in Vermont do is as different from that as like local organic agriculture is from industrial agriculture. And of course, we would recognize, in recognizing the differences between local organic agriculture and industrial agriculture, that there are all these different expressions that this type of land use can have. That, we have a range of different approaches that can be applied in different ways. And to say it's all farming would be inaccurate, right? We would be like, oh, what practices are they using? How are they protecting pollinators? How are they protecting biodiversity? And the same is true for forestry. So instead of just sort of snapping to this idea that like all forestry is bad for forests, recognize that it's really nuanced and ask questions about what exactly they're doing and how it's being used in that case.
All right, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
To get in touch with Ethan or any Vermont County forester, visit the website on your screen, or you can call Ethan at the number listed. That wraps up our program for today. From the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX, I'm Jolie Whitney. Thank you for watching and have a good one.